Okay, Proxmox has been kicking me in the rear, literally, and I'm not afraid to admit it. In fact, for a while, Proxmox drove me to Cockpit. For those who don't know, Cockpit is a web interface for servers. Well, for any computer you can load it up on and remotely access it via your browser, and it gives you a nice GUI. Cockpit's put out by Red Hat, well, Fedora, Red Hat, and I don't have exactly the greatest track record with Fedora either. It's not my favorite distribution. I'm probably one of the few people around that would say they don't like Fedora, but nah, I don't really like it. And it's not that it's a corporate distribution either. I mean, they say community, but yeah, it's based on Red Hat. But now I'm rambling again, and back to the reason. Okay, with Cockpit, it's just a interface over your default Linux system. It's just a GUI right on top of that, and for the most part I kind of understand how that works. However, Proxmox was, well, it's basically a GUI running over the top of a Linux system, but the way it's set up is not what I would call the standard way Linux does things, or at least the way I'm used to doing things on Linux. And I have had experience with hypervisors before. I spent a whole lot of time working with the Type 2 Hypervisor VirtualBox by Oracle. That was my first foray into the world of virtual machines, and when I was using VirtualBox, at one point I had an entire double network set up with routers and servers and clients all virtualized. That was back when I was playing around with Linux-based routers. In fact, actually creating a few from scratch and using some of the distros like IPFire or OpenWart or PFSense. Needless to say, though, I was somewhat confused when I loaded up Proxmox and started playing around with this interface, because its approach is different, I guess, is the best way to put it. As I said, I did a lot of work with VirtualBox, a Type 2 hypervisor, but yes, there were some definite performance hits doing that, which is why I wanted to look into Type 1 hypervisors. So about a week and a half ago, I came back to Proxmox because I probably really didn't give it a fair shake first time around, because I had a specific project I wanted to accomplish and it wasn't helping. But like I say, once I jumped off Proxmox, I did actually a little bit of command line with libvirt and KVM, and then with a Cockpit. But I'm back on Proxmox now to give it the chance it deserves. This is what I'm going to be covering in this video is not a how-to guide, a tutorial of any sort. This is just a high-level look at Proxmox, how their interface is put together, and how it works. Let's just call out some stuff I would really like to know before I started with Proxmox, but I wasn't finding it when I looked for tutorials and papers and articles on it. So I think a lot of my problems with Proxmox, or well, some of them anyways, were the various tutorials and articles I found online all talked about how to do something specific. Create a virtual machine, do this network task, add this drive. Again, they were all talking about how to do something specific. They weren't really talking about Proxmox in general and how the interface works and how it's set up. And it is somewhat different than your normal Linux setup. So I think that was my big problem. And at the time, I just didn't want to play around with it so much. So I jumped over to something I knew would work fairly straightforward. But anyway, that's the motivation for this series of posts and videos, is just an overview of how Proxmox GUI works and how it's set up. And I think knowing this would have helped me a lot, and I hope it helps other people a lot when they do these tutorials to know why they're doing stuff. Now I'm going to state up front that I'm hardly a Proxmox expert. I've actually only been using it for, well, I had a couple days flirt with it a month or so ago, and I've really only been using it solidly for the last probably week and a half. But I think I've learned something, and like I say, I hope my issues, since I've seemed to be resolving them now, will help other people. But again, remember, I'm far from the expert on this subject. And the whole tutorial thing, I think it's just the way the internet works. Those are the ones that are looked at the most. People want to know how to do something specific. They're not looking for a general overview. So specific instructions are what bubble to the top when you look for various tutorials on Proxmox. But to move forward, this is probably going to be a series of videos, and it matches a series of posts I'm writing on retiredtechie.com. Link in the description below if anybody wants to read those. But I'm going to be covering a variety of subjects, and as of right now, I'm going to of Proxmox. The next one is going to be on installation and initial setup, and why you choose some things you do when you're doing the setup, and why you don't choose some other things. But again, it's not so much a how-to guide as this is why you're doing things, and this is sort of how the interface works. I mean, the setup in Proxmox is actually pretty easy. The installation and setup, that is. I'm going to follow that out with after that, we're talking about maybe adding and dealing with users, groups, and permissions, because that's a little different than you normally do it in, like I say, Cockpit. It's, different. So we're going to talk about those differences. And then setting up and using storage drives of a variety of types, including USB or spinning drives or SSDs or even network drives. We're going to discuss that area of the interface of Proxmox. And then we'll finally get around to building and running a virtual machine and how to configure and reconfigure those. And at that point, it's hoped that with a good understanding of the interface, you'll know why we're doing a lot of the things we're doing. Okay, that's about it for this video. This is a little different than my normal fare. It's not very long. Just don't hold me to my topic list I gave earlier. As I gain more experience, that's going to be modified and changed as I revisit it. And again, there's a series on retiredtechie.com, link below, that this video closely follows. In fact, I'm publishing those articles first and doing the videos on them. As always, if you have thoughts, please comment. I like to get comments. It's actually kind of a funny thing. I get more texts and messages and stuff than I get comments, and it's interesting, but I do like hearing from the people out there. Also, remember to like and subscribe. It helps the visibility of this channel. I'm not really worried about anything else but reaching more people. So again, please like and subscribe.